Welcome to this explainer. If you're tuning into this, there is a really good chance that you, or maybe someone you love deeply, might be navigating some pretty dark depths right now. You might feel totally overwhelmed by these cycles of pain that just seem impossible to break. Well, today we're stepping into a profound, deeply personal journey drawn directly from the manuscript archives and personal journals of Amy Beedle. We're going to look at the very beginning of her story, episode 1 of her true life testimony, to really understand the real biological and spiritual mechanics of generational trauma. I want you to listen closely to this, because this explainer isn't about judgment at all. It's about mapping the architecture of pain so we can actually find the exit.
Amy's core message to all of us is so incredibly powerful. She says, I am no more special than you. I have been exactly where you are right now. What she means is that true restoration, it doesn't start in some pristine, perfect environment. It starts right in the messy, terrifying reality of trauma. She wrote this to assure anyone listening that there is absolutely no depth of chaos that disqualifies you from healing. She isn't speaking down from an ivory tower. She is speaking directly from the trenches.
Part 1, exactly where you are. Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp just how miraculous her recovery actually is, we first have to acknowledge the sheer crushing weight of what she carried. For nearly 3 decades, literally 29 years, Amy was completely trapped. She navigated severe mental health misdiagnoses, grueling domestic abuse, and absolutely crippling addiction. It is so absolutely crucial that we look at these struggles plainly and just strip away any shame from them right now. Validating this pain is the very first step. Because you guys, this wasn't just a brief rough patch. This was an entire era of her life completely defined by survival. Part 2, the root of the chaos. To understand survival mode, we really have to trace it back to the origin story, right? And we're looking at this clinically. Definitely not to place blame on individuals, but to see how systemic family dynamics set up this devastating baseline. Amy was born into a home just completely overshadowed by extreme, unpredictable psychological terror. Her biological father, David, suffered from severe schizophrenia and a multiple personality disorder. The danger actually climaxed in this terrifying moment when David stood right over Amy's mother, Sandra, aimed a gun, and pulled the trigger. Miraculously, and I mean miraculously, in that exact fraction of a second, Sandra's body inexplicably flipped over and the bullet missed her. Sandra literally walked away from an execution. And from that day on, Sandra became this fierce, protective shield, dedicating her entire life to building barricades between her daughter and the madness of her family tree. But here's the thing. Despite her mom's absolutely incredible physical protection, the trauma still took its toll. The external threat eventually mutated into a deeply internal one. As Amy grew up, she started to deeply fear her own genetics. She was just terrified that she had inherited the exact same psychological disorders that completely consumed the father she never really knew. Part 3, trapped in the cycle. Now, what's really interesting and honestly heartbreaking to see laid out like this is how fast things compound. When fear is constantly running in the background, the generational cycle repeats itself at a terrifying speed. At age 11 and a half, she learned from the 5 o'clock news that her father had fatally stabbed his own parents before ending his own life. By 16, a man 10 years her senior used a date rape drug on her, which resulted in her first pregnancy. So, frightened and just desperately seeking any form of stability, she entered a highly abusive marriage with him at 17. By the time she was 21, she was a mother to 4 young children, all under the age of 5. The compounding weight of the trauma she endured in just 10 short years is almost unimaginable. During this whole period, there was this massive, stark contrast between her external illusion and the actual internal reality. And we really need to destigmatize her choices here. Naively, she stayed with her abuser, Travis, truly believing that despite the violence, her 4 small children just desperately needed a father figure in their lives. But the internal reality, it was devastating. She was enduring severe self-sabotage. And heartbreakingly, her eldest daughter Alexandria was hiding in the bedroom at night, trying to comfort and protect the younger siblings from the sounds of the abuse going on. It was actively planting the roots of trauma right into the next generation. Amy's own personal journals give us these incredibly visceral, sensory details of exactly how terrifying her daily reality actually was. When Travis was triggered, usually by alcohol or even just certain kinds of music, his entire demeanor would completely change. Amy notes she would purposefully hide her face so he couldn't hit her there. Why? Because she knew if she got hit in the face, she would black out and violently fight back. So instead, she just took the abuse, trying desperately to just calm him down. Looking back on it, she realized she was really dealing with an unseen enemy, noting that the one responsible for the violence felt like a completely different entity taking over him.
Part 4. Self-Medicating Inner Chaos. Listen, living in a constant, unrelenting state of terror, it requires a coping mechanism. It just does. And it is absolutely crucial that we remove the stigma of addiction right here. Amy didn't turn to drugs because it was some sort of moral failure. Not at all. She turned to methamphetamine and other substances to self-medicate. Her mind and her body were filled with what she described in her journals as this unbearable fuzziness and static. She was just trying to medicate the internal chaos that was entirely consuming her from the inside out. And this brilliantly illustrates something so important. Emotional trauma almost always manifests physically in the body. Long before the heavy drug use, even back in her early teens, she was popping Dawn's pills for this unexplainable, severe back pain. Later on, it felt like full-blown fibromyalgia throughout her entire body. She noted she literally couldn't move a muscle because it hurt so incredibly much. And this was all paired with a constant state of extreme anxiety and severe agoraphobia. Her emotional trauma was quite literally breaking down her physical body.
Part 5. The hijacked nervous system. So, to truly heal from all this, we've got to look through the lens of clinical neuroscience to understand what was actually happening to her biology. Amy was suffering from what's called a vagus nerve hijack. When you experience compounded trauma, especially when it starts in childhood, it forces your body into a constant fight or flight survival mode. The nervous system literally becomes locked in this endless state of hypervigilance. Amy's erratic behavior, the intense physical pain she felt, the overwhelming need to numb out with drugs, it wasn't a choice. It was the direct biological result of a nervous system that had been taken hostage.
So the absolutely crucial point is this. The body remembers what the heart tries to hide. Let that sink in for a second. The trauma she experienced wasn't just living in her thoughts. It was stored away on a cellular level. It entirely bypassed her conscious control. You literally cannot outthink a hijacked nervous system. But here is the incredible news. There is a roadmap out. There is a clear path that leads from the dark shadow of generational trauma, right through the deception of all those false fixes we try, all the way to miraculous, permanent healing. Amy's mother bought her the time she desperately needed, and Amy eventually did the deep, hard work to dismantle these inner demons and completely break those ancestral chains.
Which leaves us with this really profound final question to chew on today. If your body chemically and biologically remembers the trauma that your mind tries so desperately to hide, how do you actually begin to heal a hijacked nervous system? How do you really move from the shadow to the light? I want you to think about that, because that is exactly the restoration we are going to map out together in episode 2 of this explainer. Thank you so much for joining me today, and hey, keep seeking the light.